Good morning. Welcome everyone to the meeting of the Barrie Police Services Board for February 19th, 2026. I'd like to call the meeting to order and begin with our land acknowledgement. In keeping with Indigenous protocol and building respectful relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada, it is customary to acknowledge the traditional territories and ancestral lands of Indigenous people. We would like to acknowledge this sacred land on which the Barrie Simcoe Emergency Service Campus operates. It has been the site for human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the ancestral land of the Wendat and the Anishinaabe Nation. The treaty that was signed for this particular parcel of land is collectively referred to as the Williams Treaty. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture. We also recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land and are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect. Thank you. We are joined virtually by Member Khan and Mayor Nuttall. Motion to approve today's agenda that was distributed in advance. Mr. Khan? Mr. Khan? Any amendments, questions, comments with respect to today's agenda? Seeing none, those in favor? Thank you. Any conflicts of interest anyone would like to declare with respect to today's agenda? Seeing none, move on to you, Chief, to introduce our newest Sergeant, Chief Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. It gives me a great pleasure on behalf of the organization to recognize Sergeant Michael Rasmussen. Michael has been a member of the Barrie Police Service since 2009. During this time with the Barrie Police, he has been a member of the Uniform Patrol Division, working as a coach officer, scenes of crime officer, threat technician, and drug recognition evaluator. He's also been a member of the Forensic Identification Unit. Michael is currently assigned to Platoon 2, where he was promoted to Sergeant in January 2026. Michael and his wife, Ashley, enjoy spending time with their two young children, Ellie and James. James is here with us today, and have a passion for travel. I would note that Sergeant Rasmussen's among our recently promoted individuals was recognized by this organization and its membership as being one of those individuals who takes time to speak and to help others around him develop. Maybe a harken back to his coach time, but certainly recognized by this organization and appreciated as our culture changes over time. We look to those individuals to lead us. So I'm happy to hand Sergeant Rasmussen's his badge.
Thanks, Chief, and congratulations, Sergeant. Included in our package were our minutes of January 22nd, 2026. A motion to approve those minutes. Mr. Khan, any questions, amendments, comments with respect to those minutes? Seeing none, those in favor? Thank you. Chief, I'll hand it back to you. You may have some initial comments before you introduce your team with respect to our triannual statistics.
Thank you, Chair. No, as you're well aware, as the board's asked for, and we have sought to provide as great as transparency as possible, certainly to the board, but also to our broader community when they understand in terms of how this organization is performing not simply on volume, but certainly with the complexity of measuring crime. We've gone out of our way to look at the research around the best ways to explain and to measure how we are doing what we are doing. And our resources have been certainly dedicated to that. And I will hand it over to our organizational researcher, Madison Sharman. I also have, as you're well aware, our crime analyst, Sam Scott, is online to answer any specific questions about the data as well. And if Madison's ready.
Thanks, Chief. Welcome, Madison.
All right. Okay. Good morning, everybody. As the chief said, my name is Madison. I'm going to talk about our stats, looking specifically in the year of 2025, so the whole year wrap up. So as I mentioned, the data in this presentation is updated as of March 31st, 2025. It was pushed from January, so that's why we're just a little bit in our reporting. And we look at our CAD stats as well as our niche and records management systems to provide this information to you. I do want to mention this isn't reflected in these stats, but going forward, we do have a boundary update. So when we present our stats to you next, we have some new land area now considered, as well as I believe about 90 new addresses. So that may change. We have looked at the stats and don't anticipate a huge change in our reporting. But just so the board and community know, this will be updated and reflected in our next stat period. So of course, as we always do, we're going to look at multiple data sources. And this is really about looking at the different lenses and the different stories that these data tell, and altogether gives us a better picture of what's going on within the city. So we're going to look at CAD created events. So that is calls for service that come into our department mainly by phone or text, which we're going to talk about, which is a really interesting update. Looking at then social disorder. So that is from CAD calls and just indicate usually non-criminal events, but high volume offenses or incidents that take a lot of community attention and concern. So worth looking at. Then we'll talk about our crime counts. So that is our record system that once they come into CAD, they're processed through that and coded and either criminal, non-criminal, and then look at harm. So those criminal offenses are then given a weighted score, just understanding not all crime is necessarily equal. So looking at that as an additional. So looking first at CAD events. So again, really just pure volume. We're seeing a little bit of a higher call volume than we did last year. As a volume indicator, yes, it shows that we're busier, but we're going to talk about the proactivity of this really being the driver of the increase rather than calls coming in from the community. So when we look at our CAD events and kind of the composition of what we're dealing with, 10% of our CAD calls are related to community service. And this is really kind of our code word and coding in our system for those proactive pieces. So hotspot patrols, our city guardians and our special constables, they use these book offs, and that indicates a high level of proactivity within our community. And same with traffic stops, right? Those are officer generated proactive calls. Then when we go down the list, we look at social disorder indicators in the yellow. So again, those are those calls that take a lot of time and volume, often are non-criminal in nature when they conclude. So looking at things like police assistance, unwanted person, ambulance assist, and suspicious person. And then in the navy there is kind of that classic reactivity piece. So looking at motor vehicle collisions, complaints, police information, intimate partner violence, and alarm calls. So I do want to kind of go a blast to the past. So September 2024, this is our CAD composition from 2024. So like I just said, community services is now taking up 10% of our calls for service of that proactivity, whereas September 2024, we were looking at 3.7%. So again, just speaking to the level of proactivity and kind of the change in composition of what we're seeing within our community. So I think this is really interesting kind of comparison to where we were a couple years ago. When we look at the officer generated calls, again, that proactivity piece, we're seeing nearly a quarter of our calls are officer generated. So traffic stops, but also they're going around the community, marking themselves off on a hotspot or see something a little bit fishy that they want to check out later. So there's a large level of that officer proactivity work. And again, when it comes to our frontline officer response, this is also changing. We're seeing a lot more frontline officer time spent on calls. And when digging into this a little bit further, interestingly, this is actually not related to proactivity at all. So what we see is police assistants taking up the largest volume of our hours, as well as mental health calls, motor vehicle accidents, and intimate partner violence. When we look at our calls by priority, again, we previously reported on this. We're seeing that proactivity, that kind of darker blue, grow in terms of our composition. Other than that, things are staying about the same, especially when we look at our priority 1 and 0. Those are those emergency calls, the real lights and sirens we need to get to quickly. That sits at about 23% between those two. And again, just seeing the level of proactivity and administration in our calls increase year over year. And this is really interesting because I want to talk about the different levels of frontline responses. So we talk a lot about officer time, but I also want to look at, out of those 80,000 or so calls for service, we see about 57% handled by our officers, but 43% this year handled by communication, the triaging they do. So directing to a better resource or being able to de-escalate and give advice over the phone. So I think it's really important to understand there's kind of layers to a frontline response, and really giving credit, because without the communicators being able to triage that would mean officers would need to handle 100% of these, right? So that good work there. And also just some communication highlights, right? So as an analyst, really speaking to the data, but then reaching out to our units to see, from their perspective in 2025, what are some quantitative wins as well. So here we have the rapid adoption of text to 911. This is really interesting. We've seen a 200% nearly increase in text to 911 over 2 years. So in 2023, we dealt with about 7,500 to 23,000 in 2025. So it just reflects the different way that the community is reporting to us and communicating with us, and a different resource required too in terms of communication and triaging and handling that information. The National Emergency Association has standards of 90% of 911 calls are answered in 15 seconds or less. The Barrie Police is sitting at 98.5% of emergency calls are answered in 15 seconds or less, and 95% are answered within 10 seconds or less. So again, just showing the huge amount of volume that our communicators are dealing with. And then looking at just general communication, phone in and out, handling over 200,000 calls and information that way. So also having a resource for officers to call in and ask our communicators questions. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. Now we're going to look at our crime count. So we've dealt with CAD, we've dealt with social disorder. Now we're going to look at our crime counts. This trend has remained significant over the years. We see about 12% of our occurrences being criminal, and a majority being non-criminal. I do want to kind of remind everybody the differences between those. So you would have criminal being things such as, of course, like homicide, robbery, things that result in a criminal charge. But there are a lot of non-criminal instances, those noise complaints, things like traffic stops, unwanted persons, those volume drivers, that takes up a lot of our time. So it does, and it is reflected in that composition. Also, when we look at our most common charges, we see mainly breach-related administrative justice charges as our leading. And then we go down to theft under shoplifting, assault-related mischief, operation well impaired, and then again, another more breach, like, so the failed to comply, failed to attend court. I do want to mention we had just nearly, or I guess I'll say just over 7,000 charges laid, with about 2,000 people in the city of Barrie charged. I do want to speak to the concentration, because we talk about, of course, evidence-based policing and research all the time. And there's this idea of the law of crime concentration, which is a small amount of people or places experience or cause the majority of the harm and volume. when it comes to crime. So looking at charged people, less than 1% of charged persons make up 20% of the city's total harm. So again, really concentrated. So we see, of that 2,000 people, about 20 of them causing a lot of harm. And we have are quite aware of who those are and being able to proactively target that and keep an eye on those things. And of course, when it comes to highlighting, the multitude of units that help out across the service, I do want to mention our records and information management system. So, communicators answer the calls, officers go to the calls, records really has to code and do the administrative work to keep our data and our information all housed and nice and clean so that we can operate effectively. So I just want to shout them out as well. They entered over 91,000 reports into our records management system this year, 14,000 record checks, right? So a lot of work behind the scenes on that as well. We've covered crime counts, CAD, social disorder. Now we're going to jump into harm. So once we have our criminal occurrences, those crimes are assigned weights, and this comes out of the Crime Severity Index, which is managed by Stats Canada. So these are weights given to crimes. Police have no influence on the weight of these. Instead, they're determined by actual sentencing and incarceration practices across Canada. This is a free tool and is available to any police service across Canada to use. So according to research, we have our harm, but altogether, when all the buckets are together, it's a little bit noisy. So what we need to do is break them up into different categories to really see the benefits. So we have community reported harm. Think of that as our more, classical, traditional things where something is experienced in the community, often violence against a person that then gets reported to the community. That takes up about 68% of our harm, which is really interesting when you think of 12% of criminal occurrences and just volume. Then we have our proactive. So that's things that we often find by dedicating police resources to them. So think of various drug or trafficking or possession of weapons charges. That sits at about 24% of our total harm. And then commercially detected, think of those as things that can be influenced by private resources, such as a loss prevention officer being hired. That sits at about 8% of our harm. Lots of volume of commercial, but low harm in terms of impact to community and person. So when we look at our harm scores, again, looking at the total harm is a little noisy. However, it is low for this year compared to 2024 and 2023. Oh, of course. That's okay. This is the interesting keyboard. Okay, perfect. So like I said, when you look at total harm, it's a little bit noisy, but just to show in comparison, we are a lower harm in total than we were the last 2 years. Hello, Robert. So this is really, I think, our meat and potatoes of the stats and looking at our harm. So our community reported harm, the violence against community, these are kind of the big ticket items that have impacts for people who are experiencing them. So looking at our community reported harm, we are on the lower end of the last 2 years, which is good. And what we see in terms of what drives these numbers is the same. It's very consistent year over year. We see fraud taking up a huge percentage of this, break and enter, sexual assault, robbery, theft under. So again, this is harm. When we look at volume, we see a lot less of these incidences. Remember, only 12% of our occurrences are criminal, but these are extremely harmful, so they take up a lot of weight in terms of this lens. So again, just kind of two different pairs of glasses that we're putting on to understand. When we look at our proactive, and this speaks to those two different glasses, really, we see a huge amount of volume of proactivity, right? When it comes to proactive harm, so within those proactive occurrences, the harm that we are proactively preventing, it's still high, but we're not seeing it necessarily increase or a consistent trend. It's kind of up and down. And again, this is really going to depend on what we're finding in the community, the resources we have dedicated to this, and the resources and type of incidents that those resources are dedicated to. So what we see in terms of our proactive drivers, so things that officers detect and are able to kind of intervene before they cause harm to somebody else, bail violations, possession of weapons, as well as various trafficking of drugs. And then commercially detected harm, we're just continuing to see this trend. It's really driven by shoplifting. And again, this can really be influenced by the resources that are being put into detecting it. So it could be there's more reporting. It could be there's more shoplifting. It could be just kind of an indicator of an economic climate. It is very up and down in terms of the causes of it, and this is why we break it out. But we do know it is increasing. We're consistently seeing a large amount of volume in terms of shoplifting and commercial theft. And I do want to talk about, remind the board and the public of the different priorities. I maybe shouldn't say conflicting, but different priorities, right? When it comes to policing and police resources and the lens that you're wearing, right? When it comes to harmed drivers, we have those criminal events. And when it comes to those volume drivers, we're really seeing more. So that's social disorder. So these cause or require different police resources, different thinking, different approaches, maybe even non-police resources in comparison or in collaboration. So just keeping that in mind in terms of, different kind of lenses and experiences going on within the community. When we look at our harm map, we have, again, CAD, volume, crime count, so where are the crimes happening, and harm, where is the harm happening? So we see different resources required in each, but also we see a different lens of the city, depending on the map we're looking at. So by considering them all together, we're able to effectively deploy resources, working kind of in a smarter way. When we look at our harm year over year, we do have consistent harm spots. That's what we proactively target, and we'll talk about our hexagon deployment, but that's what we proactively target. The tallest towers are the most harmful events. Those are often one-offs, things that nobody really saw coming. We do see those change year over year. Those aren't things that we can predict, and they're also not consistent. So we do see kind of tall towers jump around the city year over year, but knowing that the ones that are at least consistent and persistent harm, we monitor, and that's what we proactively target. As we mentioned, and I believe we presented to the board last year, we shifted away from looking specifically at addresses and more so at these like micro locations. So we've called it our hexagon deployment, where we've overlaid this kind of hexagonal mapping across the city and are able to look at harm and volume, but really our focus here is looking at harm and where it's happening across the city, when, and then really interestingly in kind of our new approach in terms of hot projects, and we'll speak to this, is why. Why is this harm happening across the city and in those areas that are experiencing persistent? So what we've done is look at different sizes depending on the area in the city. So downtown has a much different population, geographic structure, density area. So what we've done is used smaller hexagons, so even micro targets downtown, because it's a different part of our community as opposed to more of the suburban pieces where, you have much better sight lines and visibility because it's spread out. You're not dealing with a concentration of tall towers, for example. So those are at 300-meter hexagons, where downtown is at 100-meter hexagons. However, when we overlay the 300 hexagons across the entire city, we see that 20% of harm happens in less than 1% of those micro locations. Actually, less than half of 1% of those micro locations. So again, really speaking to that crime concentration. It happens in a small amount of area with a small level of people that we are able to consistently monitor. So selecting these areas really is a balance between data and operations. So as I mentioned, those really tall towers, for example, where one thing happened we didn't see coming that was extremely insulated and targeted, it's not responsible for us to use police resources to continue to monitor that, because we know that the threat of continued harm in that location is next to near zero. So what we do instead is we look at those areas of consistent harm that is happening time over time, and why is it happening. So we've done that with our hexagon monitoring. So using these micro locations, what we found is some of our harm spots from previous stayed the same. They ended up in a micro location. Does that make sense? But we've also identified a couple new ones. So I do want to mention the areas that have stayed consistent, those kind of traditional harm spots that have also migrated over to this project, are experiencing the same level of proactivity. They're not dropping off. They're not needing more attention. We're consistently targeting them. In the new areas identified, we've seen a 7% increase in proactivity compared to last year. So again, our officers are taking this information in. We're increasing our proactivity in those levels, which is really, really important. I do want to talk about as well in terms of downtown specifically. We've looked and saw a 13% reduction in community reported harm. Again, this is a very, very small period of time. So we only rolled out our hexagons to our platoons at the end of last year. So we are only a few months in. So really promising to see some of this, and a 90% increase in officer generated incidents downtown. So really looking at enhanced visibility. And for this, I will also credit our special constables that are downtown. This is a sworn frontline officer only. A lot of proactivity from our downtown special constables is really important to mention. And then next, I'm going to ask Sergeant McKibben to come up and just speak very briefly on, the focusing on why harm in those hexes and kind of the proactivity and direction to our front line.
Good morning. I'm going to keep this very high level, kind of use this time to create a bit of a teaser. Because full disclosure, I'm actually hoping for the frontline member who is responsible for this project specifically and or for staff sergeant to come to the board meeting to present on the details about their deployment strategies and kind of the results that we're seeing. But to just kind of build on what Madison shared about our presentation to platoons in the fall, we kind of created that, like, what does this hexagon deployment strategy look like? And what's really neat is that our front line, each platoon, their approach has been a bit unique. So one platoon is just kind of dedicating resources to overall enforcement within their assigned hexagons. But for platoon 3 specifically, again, I'm going to keep this very high level, but we had our frontline officer identify that she had attended an increased amount of calls for service involving pedestrian and cyclist strikes. So the ask goes into our wonderful crime analyst, Sam, who sure enough pulls the statistics, and it reveals that since 2023, we've actually experienced a 25% increase in that type of call for service. So what the officer felt is then supported by the data. And this is the strategy that they're using to then address that with targeted enforcement. So this front line is, this platoon is going off of what the data shows. So where are these occurrences happening within the city and when? So we are going to have an increased police presence. There is going to be that targeted enforcement based on where this harm is occurring. So we recognize that results are not going to come overnight. And sometimes the season kind of dictates as to what those influences are. We have our wonderful snowbanks that are taller than most men right now, but in the summertime, it's different because we have more foot traffic. So we're just going to have to be aware of the when and the where because we want to essentially address the harm. So we're hoping that in the coming seasons, we'll be able to show you that decrease in harm by the added police presence. So I'll leave it there for future discussion on this specifically. But overall, I think this deployment strategy is going to provide you with a lot of really wonderful examples of what proactive policing can look like. It's not a one fits all type of approach. And we're hoping for it to continue to be officer driven. So thank you for your time.
Ian.
Thank you, Ms. Sherman. Questions from the board? I've got a few. In terms of the community service, the substantial increase, are we able to attribute that part related to our downtown initiative? Proactive policing?
I would say yes. I know Sam's on the call and could probably speak a little bit more. When it comes to the hotspot policing and in the community response in our CAD data, it's community services, specifically hotspot patrol. And that's really been the driver. And I think, yes, the special constables downtown have been a huge driver of this, especially that 90% increase of visibility downtown. But Sam, did you want to add anything else to that?
No, I completely agree with what you're saying. Our special constables downtown and the Guardians, especially over the summer months, have done a lot of work down there, a lot of great work, and it's evident through the data as well.
Almost 1 in 5 of our charges are failed to comply. It's a lot of resources used by this service, and I assume chief and deputies that's consistent with other services that are, that's 20% of the charges we lay are failed to comply.
Yes, Chair. Administration charges like that though are, and that is a fair observation, and but we look at that as an opportunity, quite honestly, because that is ripe for approaching it differently. And we have looked at our courts personnel, and they've undertaken a number of projects in an attempt to simply fail to attend court is an obvious one. The challenge is some of the individuals we deal with on a regular basis may not have, the resources or even the awareness of when their court date is after they are released. And there are different methods that we are looking at to address that. It saves a whole bunch of time and a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of money if we're able to do things a little differently rather than lay a charge. And it's not about avoiding crime or avoiding laying it. It's about being more effective and efficient in what we do. And at the end of the day, the outcome we're after is attendance at court. It's not getting the charge. It's that individual showing up where they're required to, when they're required to. And so there are a whole host of challenges there, given some of the individuals that we do deal with.
I do want to mention as well, from the stats perspective, when you look at the crime concentration, what happens is the same people often being seen again and again. So they may commit a new crime, but as part of that new crime, they also get a breach charge, right? So in terms of those 7,000 charges, but 2,000 people, but only less than 1% of those people we see all the time. We've also run a project looking at offender management led by Inspector Dusnap in terms of targeting our high harm offenders who are released out into our community and looking at different kind of ways to engage them and keep an eye on them. And through that, we've been able to kind of, the more you proactively target somebody and the more you monitor them, more likely you're going to find them doing something likely undesirable or against their conditions. So some of that is also related to proactive work done by our high harm teams.
One last, I have more of a comment before I hand it over to Strong. That's a question. The board has made it a priority to look at the way we police and do that by way of evidence. But it's great to have the statistics. Okay, what are we doing with it? So the deployment strategy is what's really critical. Is okay, we've now got some consistent data over time that we can use. Okay, now how are we going to police our city differently as a result of that? So the board looks forward to that. Chief.
Thank you, Chair. And quickly, and as was presented by Sergeant McGibbon, I think that is the desire to bring before the board just some examples of some of the mini projects. Again, from Inspector Brouillard's area, the frontline staff sergeants are tasked with, coming up with those mini projects to take that data and operationalize it and target certain areas to reduce that crime. So we are looking for that real-time effect. And certainly it's very engaging for our members. Look forward to that. Chief Mr. Strong.
Hey, Chair. For you, perhaps to Sharman or maybe to the chief, but thinking about intimate partner violence and the emphasis that we put as a police service on attempting to make, I guess, progressive, positive inroads in preventing intimate partner violence or reducing the harms associated with intimate partner violence. We have had a lot of training and projects, and I know in the stats that 1.67% of the crimes were intimate partner violence. And I just have a few questions around that. Like, do we know how many of those calls result in charges or convictions? And then my second follow-up to that is, do we keep these households or individuals as part of the high harm proactive check-in group so that we're doing our best to assist people who are victims of intimate partner violence and hopefully to help provide them with resources so that we're helping people move out of that situation?
Before I hand it over to Madison on the specific classification of intimate partner violence as an addition in CAD. Before I do that, just as an observation, much like sexual assault we're not under any illusion that it is greatly underreported. These are the only that are reported. And so to pretend that this isn't occurring on a more regular basis. And certainly with response to those calls in general, we are looking at different approaches where we see repeat individuals, whether it's the single individual as the victim, single individual as the involved person, or the dyad, two individuals that are similarly linked, or it could be one of those individuals without someone else. We're looking at ways to interdict and certainly influence differently with partnerships with other agencies, because we realize we are limited by our utility as a social service organization, public safety in general. We only have certain tools available to us, whereas other agencies may be best able to address victim needs, and so we are exploring that. But with respect to the classification,
Yeah, so previously it was coded as domestic dispute in our data. 2025 was the first year we implemented the intimate partner violence wording. So it's just a kind of a new word for what was traditionally coded as domestic dispute. Sam and I pulled the data in terms of the ones that resulted in criminal charges. I'm going to say this is by memory, and I can provide the board a better update. I believe it was about 63% resulted in criminal charges, but we also have mandatory charging for intimate partner violence. So it is kind of it's just a really complex incident as well. For convictions, right now we actually haven't looked into that. We're not sure. That data sits with our courts, and I think we need to work on our information pass back a little bit better to strengthen that. And intimate partner violence is an extremely hard thing to prevent, because when we look at our proactivity, a lot of research talks about what crime happens outside and inside, kind of the idea of the behind closed doors. So if we're parked on a busy street, it isn't necessarily going to deter somebody from doing something indoors. So that's a very, very complex occurrence and incident and societal problem that we're working through, that takes a little bit more than just kind of the visibility that we've worked towards.
Follow up to that, and Chief, you mentioned it, that this type of crime is underreported. And I wonder if we track calls for service that maybe aren't specifically like called in as intimate partner violence, but then when our officers get there, we see that maybe that's an underlying factor, or somebody called in for like disturbance, but there's something else happening. Like, is there a way that we try to track that and assess those individuals so that to help them when they're ready to report that they have trusting relationships with us? Or is there anything that we can do to help increase, I guess, the number of charges that we can lay here so that we can just have a positive impact in the area?
through you, Chair. So I can answer the first part of that question quite easily, because it's an easier part of the question to answer. With respect to calls coming in, they come in at, many can be a 911 hang up, like a volume type call comes in, but when our officers arrive, to be recoded. And that's what Sam, our crime analyst, Sam, then pull the data at the end. What it's coded at is finally coded at versus what it initially came in. With respect to the second part of that, appreciating this is the complexity of crime, and I'm not going to get on the soapbox. The challenge we have is if we came in here and intimate partner violence reporting went through the roof. I would recognize part of our community would be like, what are you folks in the blue uniforms with the patch? What's happened? Why aren't you doing it? But if that's as a result of people wanting to come forward because they realize perhaps the system has altered and it's more effective for a whole host of reasons, we're just part of the justice system, that's not a bad thing. Just we're seeing what's actually occurring behind closed doors that we don't know, but through the general social survey, through Statistics Canada, we know is occurring. It's just not being reported. I don't know if there's a better way forward. We are looking at working with some social service partners in far more innovative ways to try and encourage people to come forward and to address them. The real measure of outcome here is when the general social survey is reporting that less of it's occurring in the first place. But
Yeah, I was gonna say we're working with Inspector Gates on looking at kind of exactly some of those questions she asked of our unit, and we've been able to dig into that information, as well as projects kind of examining mandatory charge and what may be a better approach. So there's a lot of kind of behind the scenes work that's happening both through operations and data analysis that's looking at this.
Mr. Khan, I see you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll figure out how to lower my hand in a second. I have two questions, Chair. One through you is to the Chief. The other is to Ms. Sherman. I'll start with the one to the Chief. Chief, you mentioned based on the data and what we saw on the graph that a significant proportion of resource and time is being directed towards an administrative task, if you will. I think you referred to it as administrative in terms of the bail compliance or the offender management, following up and ensuring that those charged members are making their appearances in court. I interpret that as a relative but significant strain on resources for, in the moment, a low harm occurrence or requirement of police resources because it's following up on an administrative request or demand. My question is, in light of the success that we've had in the downtown with the Guardian program and the special constables, et cetera, is there an opportunity for the service to explore a similar model whereby there is a sworn officer matched with a group of special constables to address that sort of that list, that run sheet of following up with these offenders, thereby releasing some resources to pursue other higher harm or critical nature calls?
to you, Chair, thank you for the question. So it sort of, to be transparent, it is already occurring to some degree with our high harm team is actually with those individuals who have, as Madison had mentioned, when people are arrested on a repeated basis, are recidivists, and they are of high harm nature. They're also being charged with breaching conditions. As you can imagine, some individuals we deal with on a regular basis commit further criminal acts, and as part of that arrest are also charged with the breaches. So of those individuals, that is more of an administrative procedural thing that occurs with those individuals that are with our high harm team that are following up with people on release with our bail management type approach. The idea is to remind people the real measure of success there is there's regular basis visiting by police reduce the number of charges laid against those individuals because they believe that the police are monitoring their behavior more closely and thus affecting that concept of deterrence theory and the thought process that goes into perhaps potentially like, do I want to commit the act? What's the likelihood of me being caught? Again, there's an avenue that way. We're not suggesting that can't be done, but certainly what we're doing right now, I think it's bearing fruit. But I would argue probably the best way is going to be the administrative redirection from courts or an innovative way of looking at how we deal with those to minimize it. I mean, you would have to dive into the data. Is it because the people are just missing court dates? Then is there a better way to get them to get to court? Like, and I know there's been other research around, you know, when they had pagers, sending them an alert or giving them broken cell phones that still work and they charge, and you remind them on a regular basis to attend. I don't know, but we are looking at various ways to address it to minimize the workload to our organization and the justice system.
And I can say from a project perspective, we have worked with our courts unit, and we've also leveraged accommodated and return to work officers who are able to do some of this work and this really meaningful work, testing out various nudge strategies. And the idea is kind of investing a little bit time now so that doesn't become a problem later.
Through you, Chair, thank you to both for the response. That's the kind of input I was looking for in terms of what other effective ways are we looking to be efficient and release our resources to the other work that is critical that needs to be done. The second question, through you, Chair, to Ms. Sherman. I believe in the beginning of your presentation, and thank you for it, you made a reference to new technology. I believe you referenced text messaging. Could you just provide a little bit of insight into what's going on there?
Yeah, so I'm going to defer that to the chief. I'm not the expert on how the information comes in, but the data is really interesting.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, that's from the communication side, and people, as you can imagine, modes of communication in, and I don't want to make any sweeping generalizations, but generations may alter or change in how people choose to communicate. And texting has become very much a primary source of communication. And people can text into the Barrie Police Service, and our ability to ingest and then respond to that has been noted in the data as being as drastically increasing. But there are other avenues in terms of technology, and I think I'll touch on that in the Chief's update later on quickly, just with respect to what else we're exploring, and certainly avenues that our community as well as the board may want to participate in and take a look at.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Madison. Once again, the board looks forward to your report, and it generates a lot of discussion. I think it's a very important discussion, how we police the city. So thanks again for your presentation.
Thank you.
There were 4 items in today's consent agenda: secondary employment, time and attendance, human resources, and public complaints. Does any member of the board have any questions or want any of those items pulled? Mr. Khan.
Chair, if it's okay, I just have a comment, and that is just really an applause to the organization for following through on the board's expressed interest in member wellness. And I noted in one of the graphs a very, I don't want to use the word positive because mathematically that would be negative, but encouraging result regarding post-traumatic stress. I guess the word would be cases or incidents. And I found that very encouraging. So just glad that our members are able to access and utilize available resources to them, and that it's bearing fruit, as to steal a phrase from the chief.
Thank you, sir. Well, I have that. On the opposite side of that, Chief, is the board's extremely happy to see the legislative reduction. But on the WSIB and other lost time, the numbers are up across the board. Is there any systematic, or like, is there any thing that we need to be doing or should be doing to see if those numbers can go as well, Chief?
I'm going to actually have the HR manager, Mr. Bound, address that if I could. But I will say, with any organization that is, if we are a people-driven organization, there will be fluctuations, and we have done, at the board's direction, focus on wellness. And so, and we've been very fortunate in terms of its effect. I think the challenge we have is any alteration, even minor fluctuations, appear quite drastic because we are very fortunate. And Mr. Brown may echo that or provide more color to it or light, please.
Thank you, Chief. Chair, in response to your question, so thank you for being a numbers guy and noticing this. What this comes down to basically is 4 claims for physical injury. 2 of those claims are historic. They involve a hip replacement and a full knee replacement resulting from an injury sustained on a call for service a number of years ago. Alternate methods such as physiotherapy, et cetera, did not work for those. So because the member went off to have that and undertake that surgical procedure, they became lost time. In addition to that, we had 2 other claims. So we're talking about a total of 4 claims that are spiking that number with respect to a torn shoulder and a torn knee. And as a result of that, again, there was some lost time. Our physical injuries in terms of WSIB are historically very, very low. So you're seeing that spike in those numbers based on those 4 claims alone. They're not anything that we're concerned about at this point, and full recovery and return to work is 100% expected from all 4 of those numbers.
Thank you. I hadn't asked the question, but I was hoping that was going to be the answer. That there is a need for more resources from allocated or to deal with wellness. So I appreciate that. Any other questions on the consent items? A motion to approve those? Scott? Con? Those in favor? Thank you. Over to you, Deputy, for an update on the false alarm service provided on charges. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Barrie Police Service, we currently have a false alarm policy in place. A fee of $180 is charged to the Central Monitoring Agency for every dispatch alarm that's deemed to be false, and $120 is charged for every dispatch alarm that is canceled prior to an officer's arrival. We've had this program in place since I was in operations, so that would be 2019. The numbers we're looking at, 5-year average, we average about 1,300 alarm calls a year. Of those, approximately 97% are false. So it's something we looked at other services, and a number of services, about half a dozen, have what's called a verified alarm response program. And basically, what it is a checklist that our provides to our communications to go through with the alarm monitoring company, that they will verify through a verified response, an audio signal, video signal, on-scene witnesses, or multiple alarm activation points prior to a dispatch. Now, this doesn't affect panic, hold up, or duress alarms. Officers will be dispatched to those in short order for that. What we're trying to do is limit the amount of officer time, and I'm going to use the term wasted because that's what it is, attending false alarms. So alarm monitoring companies have a number of clients. Obviously, those clients all pay the alarm company to monitor their alarms. We become the de facto uniform response on behalf of the alarm company. Prior to this, we had no wording or a clause in there in regards to suspending Central, a monitoring alarm company, in regards to non-payment of fees. We have a couple of monitoring companies who just ignore it. They just ignore the fee. So we have no way or no recourse to bring that back online. So what we're recommending is there's going to be a registration fee. We're also going to have a suspension clause in there. Of course, it'll be a 60-day notice for them to correct whatever issues they have. If not, then we will suspend them and notify that. There will be a reinstatement fee as per a number of other services. Talking to other services, they have found this has definitely increased efficiencies where they've verified the officers that are attending alarms are actually going to verified alarms versus going and finding out that they're false. And as I said, that's approximately 97% of the time. So that is the recommendation from us. We're going to save officer time. We're not in this to increase revenue. It will increase revenue, but we're not in this to increase revenue. We're in this to increase the efficiency of our officer time and our communication staff.
Thank you, Deputy Burke. Any questions for the deputy? A motion to approve the recommendation. It's none. Any further questions? Seeing none, those in favor? Thank you. Over to you, Chief, for your monthly update report.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to once again share with the board and the community just a few of the things going on in a very vibrant and growing city of Barrie this month. January 21st was the annual Bell Let's Talk Day. We used it as an opportunity to encourage conversations about mental health within our service and across the community. Several of our members took part in a video to highlight our crisis intervention training, mobile crisis response team, and community alternate response team, and to acknowledge that mental health challenges can affect everyone. This February, Barrie Police is once again assisting with the Show the Love campaign in partnership with CFS Counseling and Wellbeing, organized this year by Special Constable Kristen Drury. The campaign collects Valentines and messages of friendship and distributes them to older adults in long-term care and retirement homes. On February 7th and 8th, members of the Community Safety and Wellbeing team and auxiliary officers braved very frigid temperatures to celebrate winter at Barrie's Winterfest. Despite the cold, our team made the best of the sunny day and the wonderful event. Couple of remarks, just and observations about our meetings and partnerships within our community. January 27th, we met with representatives from the Simcoe County District School Board and our policing partners from the region. January 29th, Deputy Burke and Staff Sergeant Aaron Gersma attended the annual Mayor's Luncheon. February 6th, we met with Dr. Rose Ricciardelli to plan and discuss and plan for the upcoming micro research course to be hosted at the Barrie Police Service. February 9th to the 13th, Barrie Police hosted the Incident Command Level 200 course, and that is for our members. It is a CSPA requirement, and it was well received, and we are looking in the fall, with our fingers crossed, hopefully for a 300 level course. Again, requirements under the CSPA that we are focused on achieving and are mandated to complete. February 17th, members attended the OACP Zone 3 meeting for updates around the region. And February 17th, we attended the Gilbert Center to meet with staff and have a tour, and again, to foster relationships with different social services and organizations around our community. February 9th, the Inspector General of Policing, Ryan Teschner, announced that a province-wide inspection would be launched, which would look at police integrity and anti-corruption practices and protections in all Ontario police agencies. There are 5 areas that the inspectorate will be addressing. However, any other areas of concern that may arise will also be examined. As always, our commitment to maintaining the highest standards of integrity and transparency and to ensure the safety and trust of our communities we serve is paramount. We welcome the inspection and will work in partnership with our board to ensure that any recommendations to strengthen police legitimacy through police accountability are implemented. And you can expect regular updates to the board with respect to that. On February 2nd, Barrie Police responded to the Maple Ridge High School. Barrie Police have charged 3 youths, aged 15, 16, and 17 in connection with an armed robbery reported at the secondary school located on Prince William Way. Barrie Police understand that this event may cause concern within the community, especially given the shooting that took place in British Columbia earlier in the month. We want to assure the public there's no ongoing safety threat. Our officers remain committed to ensuring the safety and security of all students and staff. We thank the school community and parents for their cooperation and support during this investigation. Barrie police officers responded to a 2-vehicle collision involving a pickup truck in an intersection of Dunlop Street and Cedar Point Drive on Tuesday, February 3rd, shortly after 5:19 in the morning. The driver of the passenger vehicle, a 21-year-old male from London, sustained serious but non-life-threatening injuries and was transported to a local hospital by paramedics. He was later released. The driver of the pickup truck, a Barrie man, 41, was uninjured. Barrie Police thank motorists for their patience and cooperation during the closures, which caused significant traffic delays across the west end of the city. We also want to remind drivers of the safety of our officers at a collision scene. It is crucial to avoid the area. During this investigation, several vehicles dangerously bypassed police cruisers that were attempting to manage the scene, as well as to deal with the accident, situated to block access path through, and people chose to ignore that. On February 5th, on February 4th, police were called to after two vehicle owners discovered devices attached under the hood in an area easily accessed from the outside of their vehicle near the windshield. The vehicles involved were newer model Toyota vehicles, specifically a Toyota Tundra and a Toyota Highlander. Both vehicle owners reported receiving repeated notifications on their mobile devices indicating a tracking device was nearby. However, it is important to note that not all cell phones will trigger a notification of this sort, and vehicle owners shouldn't rely solely on phone alerts to detect a tracker. Vehicle owners are encouraged to check their vehicles, particularly newer models, for anything unusual. Barrie Police have recently launched Project Lima, a traffic safety initiative, as you heard earlier, at reducing collisions involving pedestrians and cyclists in high-risk areas across the city. This effort responds to recent incidents and addresses the increased challenges posed by winter conditions such as slick roads and limited visibility at intersections, which can make navigating busy streets more hazardous. This project uses data to focus our efforts where the risk is highest. By combining enforcement with education, we're working to improve safety for everyone who uses our roads, particularly pedestrians and cyclists. This initiative reflects a proactive approach to road safety with an emphasis on prevention and shared responsibility. And we are quite excited to see how that works out. And lastly, some upcoming events. February 22nd, the Polar Plunge for Special Olympics. Exciting times. I know the deputy will be taking my place. I am unavailable, and I do apologize. I am at a CACP meeting, but the deputy is willingly stepped forward, as has Inspector Moore, and we're very excited for them to jump into warm water. February 25th is Pink Shirt Day. February 28th, members of the Barrie Police Service will be taking part in the coldest night of the year walk in support of Youth Haven. March is Fraud Prevention Month. I can take you back to our statistics. That is one of our most voluminous charges and high harm charges. So folks, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. And I look forward to inviting further events in March as well. And we will be notifying the community via social media and traditional media sources with respect to upcoming events as well. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the Chief?
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Sergeant Given, earlier for the information about Project Lima. And my question is, at the meetings that we have with the City of Barrie, have we engaged with the City of Barrie and their traffic department to see how they can also help us proactively to create safer intersections in particular? And like one of the things I'm thinking of is that, like, Bayfield and Wellington, there's traffic lights there and there's walk signals. But if you don't press the button, you don't get the walking person. And some drivers think that if the walking person's not there, that people can't walk and they like make left-hand turns into people. So are there ways that we can enhance those systems or just work with the city to use the tool that we already have to ensure that pedestrian safety is prioritized?
To you, Chair, thank you. So as a broad statement, we work very closely with the City of Barrie Traffic Services. They are very cooperative with anything that we are looking at doing and sharing data, which is incredibly important. With respect to that, I point out a very good point. And those left turns and even the right turns, one is required to yield to pedestrian traffic. Again, with the challenge of the snowbanks, we certainly can look into that. I'm unaware of that. If you push that, if that walking signal doesn't show, so we will certainly reach out to the city and share that with you.
Again, thanks, Chief. As you mentioned, with the ongoing or review by the inspector of policing, the board would appreciate probably monthly updates and the change. And I assume we are looking at our processes and policies as a result of it as well, even before the inspector may contact our service.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we are. And we are in constant contact with our inspectorate advisor, seated right behind you. Again, we appreciate that our greatest strength is the trust from the community in us, and we will go out of our way to ensure that we maintain that as best as possible.
Thanks, Chief. That is the expectation of the board as well. That concludes our open agenda for today. Our next meeting is March the 19th, 2026. Motion to meet in camera in accordance to section 44 1B of the Community Safety Policing Act. Stern, in favor? Adjourns the open portion of today's meeting.